What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're hopefully going to do the first test fire of this swap. At the end of the last video, I mentioned that I was going to install this fuel line here, and then I also said I was going to fill it up with engine oil. I've done both of those things. It took a little bit longer than expected to get the harness, so I went ahead and I put the rear bumper back on, the tail lights, and I installed the exhaust. For the wiring harness, I made the decision to get a custom one made from scratch. Now, I do have a 2GR wiring harness over here, and the initial plan was to get that modified, but once I took the cost into account, I realized that it was only a couple $100 extra to get a custom harness made, and I intend on keeping this car for the long term. So I thought, you know what, it's worth spending the extra $200 and getting one made from scratch, purpose-built for this application. Overall, it looks pretty good, no complaints so far. I mean, obviously we haven't mounted it in the car, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. Everything looks like it was done pretty well. It also came with a pigtail for the drive-by wire. What you see in the box is how it came pretty much. So there is no conduit for this, but that's really not a big deal. I have some sitting on the shelf over there. There are a couple things that I do want to note before we start installing the wiring harness. One is I don't think that the end is gonna fit through that hole, so this big connector here. So I'm gonna try going backwards, if that makes sense. And if that doesn't work, I may end up having to drill a hole, but I'm hoping that I don't have to do that. The other thing is this bad boy here. This coolant sensor is I think it's the 2-prong or 2-pin. So I just totally spaced buying a 3-pin one. I think for the purposes of just test firing the car, it's gonna be fine. Another thing, you'll notice that I don't really have any of the coolant lines hooked up or anything like that. I don't wanna fill the car up with coolant until I know that the engine runs, because I would hate to fill it up and then just have to drain it again. Because even though I'm feeling pretty good about this, you just never know when I first start. So many things can go wrong. Other than that, I do think this should theoretically be a straightforward test fire. One of the things you will notice about this harness is that there's nothing for like wire management, if that makes sense. So if we come over to the stock harness, you'll see that it has little clips like this and whatnot to keep it in place. After the test fire, my plan is to address that. I kept a lot of these like stock retaining brackets on purpose, but that's for down the road, and it should be super easy just to throw them on afterwards. I just had to stop the time lapse because I've been standing here way too long trying to figure this out. I started routing everything the way that you would in like an OEM setup, if that makes sense. And so like something that you got to see is, well, this is an OEM harness, and you'll notice that, so that's like the tail side with the connector to the ECU, and then here's this Y. If you try to run this in the OEM way, that just doesn't work, because right here are the coil packs, and they're not gonna obviously reach there or there, and then you're like, what's up with this? So what I realized is, I think this harness is actually meant to run along this side here, so it'll connect to these coil packs obviously, and then I'll run it along the timing side of the engine. I'll be able to connect the coil packs, and then the last or the end of the harness can run down the side there, so it'll connect to the alternator, O2 sensor, and all that good stuff. In terms of installing it, it's gonna be just as easy. I just didn't realize that that's how this particular harness was supposed to be installed, or at least that's what I'm thinking. And I do like it though, because it is gonna give it a cleaner look overall. The engine harness is in there and mocked up, but I'm definitely gonna have to go in there and adjust it, which I'll do at a later date. The goal for today is, again, just to test fire it, make sure this engine runs. And there's just little things like this. So this is the speedo cable, and it doesn't even come close to reaching down there. So my assumption is that I'm just not routing it properly, and this is meant to go further down. But again, I'll deal with that on another day. Yeah, everything else seems to actually be pretty much right in the place that it should be. The plan for now is we'll just throw the intake on, connect the last couple sensors, and then see if she'll turn over. I don't expect her to run very well because O2 sensors aren't connected. I don't know how much the coolant sensor will impact how well it runs. It may or may not. I'm not super familiar with it on this particular application. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay guys, we are on the right track. Battery's in, power's on. You can hear the whine and hear this. I am modulating the throttle pedal. It's opening. Let's see if she turns over. I don't expect her to run on this first time because I do need to put gas in it, but I want to see if she turns over. So she's not turning over, which means I need to figure out what's unplugged. A quick look in the engine bay and I realized that I did not connect all the plugs to the starter, and I had forgotten to connect the ground that is connected to the transmission. After doing that, she turned over. Car turns over now. So where things are at now is I'm gonna go pick up the gas, and then when we come back, I'll have gas put in this thing just like a gallon, and we'll see if she turns on, and hopefully she does. No surprise, the car did not run even with gas, so I used the scan tool to check for any codes. That helped me realize that I had forgotten to plug in the crankshaft position sensor. To give me a little bit more room, I pulled the AC compressor just slightly out of the way, and then I was able to connect the pigtail to the sensor. I also took the time to do other things like swap out the coolant sensors. So right there's the 2-pin, and I swapped out with the appropriate 3-pin. And with all of that, this is the result. Crank it over. Yes! Fuck yeah! Woo! All right, got it! As you guys could tell, I was pretty stoked from that clip. The wiring harness made it super easy. It was worth every penny. If anyone's curious where I got it from, I bought it from Wire Gap. That's not a sponsorship. I paid full price, and it was pricey, but again, 100% worth it because it was just plug and play. The only reason the car didn't start initially was because I didn't plug things in correctly, and that's it. One other thing to know is I did go through the process of just adjusting the wiring. So it just goes down a little bit lower. Everything still connects. It's tucked and out of the way. On this side, I already attached some of that wire management stuff that I talked about. Over there, I still have to do that. There's gonna be a bunch of just small things that I have to do with this car, like bleeding the cooling system, filling up the transmission with fluid and whatnot. I'm not gonna film that. I'm really gonna focus on the things that are specific to the swap. So the last couple things I have to do that I intend on filming is installing this in the cab. And then I also have to fix the tachometer because that doesn't work. And I think after those 2 videos, we'll do our first drive. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next video.